Welcome back. This is part 2 of our video series looking at the image 12 verse 10 of the secret treasure hunt. In our first video we showed how perspective could potentially lead us to Roosevelt Island. In this video we'll take a closer look at the island and look at some of the things in the image which could confirm that we are in the right place. The first thing I'm going to do is zoom in to the tip of the island as we face the skyline. Here we have a nice view on the left of the United Nations Secretariat building. If we look back at our image, also on the left, we have a rectangle, the red outline. So let's take a closer look at the Secretariat building. It was completed in 1952, and it was the first skyscraper in New York City to use a curtain wall. A curtain wall is interesting. A curtain wall system is an outer covering of a building in which the outer walls are non-structural and they're utilized only to keep the weather out and the occupants in. Down here, I think, is the relevant information. It's talking about the effects of light on visual comfort as well as solar heat gain in the building become more difficult to control when using large amounts of glass infill. So we have a building using a curtain wall that could affect its solar heat gain. And remember, this is the outer walls of the structure. And back on our image, our outer walls are red, which could be a symbol for the solar heat gain of a curtain wall. Going back to our image, going back to Google Earth. Let's zoom back out, get an overhead of the island, and let's start to move north. The next thing we come to is the smallpox hospital. And the smallpox hospital opened up in the early 1900s. And what's interesting about this is its history regarding immigrants. So despite the availability of the smallpox vaccine, New York City still had large outbreaks of the disease, in part because of the arrival of infected immigrants. And so they used this to quarantine patients and treat them. If we continue to move north, the next one we come to is the Strecker Memorial Laboratory. This building was built in 1892, and it served as a laboratory for City Hospital. And it was the first institution in the nation for pathological and bacteriological research. So they were looking at some of these types of diseases, and they were on the forefront of treating them through their research. Another very interesting thing here at this building, which was restored in 2010, is this door and its windows. This right here is an image match with the windows on the image. If we continue to move north, we come to the Goldwater Hospital. Now this is no longer there, and its place is now the Cornell Tech University. But the Goldwater Hospital has an interesting history as well. It opened in 1939 as the Welfare Hospital for Chronic Disease, and it operated as a center for polio survivors. And I find that interesting because the island itself was named after Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had polio. And I also find it interesting for one other reason. We now have a smallpox facility and a polio facility, and a research laboratory that would be studying both of those diseases. Here's an image that shows what smallpox looks like, and also on the microscopic level what polio looks like. And if you compare that to our panel, it's a pretty close representation of what those diseases look like. We also have 3 panels which could represent those 3 facilities. So to me, that's pretty interesting. It also threads the idea of immigrants and the diseases that they bring, when they travel to a new country. If we continue to move north, the next thing we come to is the Queensboro Bridge. And it'll be the last thing we look at as we try to find image matches. So this bridge opened up in 1909 with a trolley system. And then after that closed down, it had another opening in 1976, which was for the aerial tramway. And that was the first commuter aerial tramway in the United States, or in North America. And I think the colors of these 2 methods of transportation are what is important. So here's the trolley car. Notice the cream color here and here. And if we take a look at our image, we have 2 spots in our windows that are matching that color. And then the aerial tram is potentially filling the other square up top. So that is most of this window covered as far as making connections to this island. And I think that it's important to note that the idea of immigration to North America, the tale can't fully be told without discussing the impact that disease had on both the indigenous people, especially when the conquistadors brought over disease and wiped out many of the Native American cultures, and then also on the settlers in the early years as immigrants continued to bring disease over and affect those populations. So I think that is the thread that is potentially going through this puzzle as you work on establishing an area for search. Stick around for part 3, as we will get to the north part of the island and try to make some more connections.